You think school is a safe place, but what if everything could change in just 1 minute? Today, you'll hear three true stories where a normal school day turned into a living nightmare. This isn't fiction. It really happened. I didn't go to one of those massive high schools you often see in movies, the kind with hundreds or even over 1,000 students in a graduating class. My school was located in a quieter, more rural area, and my graduating class had fewer than 200 students. It was the kind of place where, even if you weren't close friends with someone, you still knew their name and could recognize them in the hallway. You basically knew almost everyone from your grade. In our small town, not much ever really happened. News was slow and life was simple. For fun, we'd hang out outside, play sports, or ride bikes. This was around 17 years ago, so I imagine things are a lot different now. One thing that always stood out to me about our school was how little bullying there seemed to be. Sure, there was some teasing here and there, but not the over-the-top kind you see in teen dramas. No locker slamming or lunch money stealing. Looking back, I can't think of a single person in my class I'd call a true bully. We had quiet students, of course. Every school does. But there was one guy, let's call him Luke, who was different. He never spoke. Ever. He wasn't strange-looking or anything like that, and when someone took the time to talk to him, he seemed polite and approachable. I had one elective class with him, a computer course that included students from all grades. Luke and I were juniors back then. The computers were those bulky old monitors, and the classroom was laid out with 2 columns, 4 rows of desks, each with its own PC. The class wasn't full, maybe 26 students out of 32 seats. Luke always sat in the second row, far left seat, without a neighbor. Most people sat next to friends from their grade. Over time, a group of seniors started mocking Luke for his silence. They'd joke about how eerie it was when he wouldn't answer the teacher, and for some reason, our teacher never said anything. I remember thinking he wasn't the most assertive type. Things escalated slightly when I saw a crumpled paper tossed at the back of Luke's head. He turned around with a look I'll never forget, part pain, part frustration, and completely defeated. One senior laughed and said, "Wasn't me," blaming someone else. I felt bad, but I stayed quiet. One afternoon, after school, I saw Luke sitting on the curb outside. I was heading to my car, got my license early, and since no one really lived within walking distance, I asked if he needed a lift. He looked surprised, but smiled and said yes. As I drove him home, which was only about 10 minutes away, we actually talked quite a bit. I told him to ignore the jerks in our class, that they weren't worth his time. He replied that it wasn't just them, he faced the same treatment in other classes. I felt terrible hearing that. When I dropped him off, I mentioned how close our houses were, and we said goodbye. From then on, we always greeted each other in class, but truthfully, I still didn't stand up for him when others targeted him. One day, Luke didn't show up to our 4th period computer class. Later that day, during 7th period English, we suddenly heard over the loudspeaker, "Lockdown! This is not a drill!" Everyone went silent. Our teacher looked panicked, rushed to turn off the lights, and told us to gather in the corner. Her fear made the rest of us even more anxious. We stayed there in the dark for 20 or 30 minutes until another announcement came. The principal explained that someone wearing a mask and carrying a black duffel bag had been spotted approaching the school. Because our school had solid security, the doors were locked quickly after someone noticed the suspicious figure. Eventually the police arrived, and the school day was ended early. It was a Friday, and I had a few friends come over to hang out at my place afterward. I don't remember many details from the rest of the evening, but I do remember waking up late that night to the sound of light tapping at my window. When I looked outside, I saw someone standing there. My heart dropped. Before I ran to wake my dad, I leaned in and asked, "Who is it?" The voice replied with a name. It was Luke. I was stunned. I opened the window just a little and asked him what he was doing and how he found me. He said, "Through the window, I tried to do something bad." I immediately understood. I asked, "Was it you at the school today?" And he said, "Yeah." I was too afraid to ask what exactly he had intended to do. I just asked how he found my house. He said he remembered me mentioning a deli near where I lived, and he rode his bike around until he saw my car. That didn't make it feel any less unsettling. Luke asked to come inside to talk more about what he had planned. I said no. I told him he needed to go to the school and turn himself in. When he hesitated and didn't leave, I loudly called out, "Dad!" That scared him off. I woke my parents and told them everything. My mum immediately called the police. When the officers came, I told them the truth. I gave them Luke's name and explained what he had told me. The police were already investigating the lockdown, so they went to his house, only to find he wasn't there. I think it was the next day that Luke either turned himself in or was found, and he confessed. Word eventually got around that Luke had been charged with something like making a terroristic threat. He did serve time, and I heard he's been out for a while now. I don't know where he is or what he's doing. A part of me still feels sympathy. He was alone and treated poorly. I was probably the only person who showed him even a small amount of kindness. But the fact remains, he showed up at school in a mask, carrying a duffel bag with weapons. Even if he lost his nerve at the last second, he came with a dark plan. I just hope, wherever he is, Luke finally got the help he needed. This took place in 2016 when I was in 5th grade. If you remember that year, you probably recall all the creepy clown sightings that were happening across the country. It was all over the news and blowing up on social media. Most grown-ups just thought it was a silly prank or some viral fad, but for kids like us, it was honestly terrifying. It started off as a regular school day. I went to an elementary school in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Still live there, actually. Nothing strange ever really happened around here. It was around 1 p.m., close to the end of the school day. We were sitting in class doing some random assignment. The room was mostly quiet, except for the occasional whisper. Then one girl in the class suddenly said, "There's a clown outside." I can still remember how high-pitched her voice was. Some of us got up and looked toward the window. And sure enough, there was a clown outside. He was only a few feet from the window, staring straight into our classroom. He wore a loose, filthy clown outfit, red and yellow, with a white painted face and dark circles around the eyes. He had this eerie smile and just stood there staring at us. Then he slowly started waving. Some of the kids laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke, but others were visibly disturbed. Our teacher, Mrs. Riker, walked to the window, looked at him, and said loudly through the glass, clearly annoyed, "Classes are in session. You need to leave." But the clown didn't move or react. He kept standing there, smiling, waving. Mrs. Riker told us all to sit down and picked up the corded classroom phone. She stepped out into the hallway with it and started talking quietly. Those phones were always installed near the door, which is why she could take it outside the classroom. She came back in after a minute or so and hung up the phone. She checked the window again, he was still there, and pulled the blinds shut. He was still doing the same creepy wave and exaggerated clown gestures. Less than 2 minutes later, the principal's voice came over the loudspeaker. "Staff, please initiate lockdown procedures." There was a serious tone in his voice, probably to let teachers know this wasn't a drill, without scaring the students too much. That's when things got intense. Mrs. Riker turned off the lights and told us to hide under our desks. She shut the door and locked it. The room fell silent. Some kids were still giggling, but others looked pale and scared. I know I was scared. We stayed like that for what felt like forever. It was actually about 30 minutes. No one knew exactly what was happening. Eventually, the principal came back on and told us the lockdown had ended and the situation had been resolved. They said school security confirmed that the clown had left. We weren't told much beyond that. Classes continued like usual, but something felt off. Everyone was whispering about it at dismissal, but none of the teachers really commented. Later that day, I was walking home with my friend Chris. We lived just a few blocks away. Suddenly, two fifth-grade girls rushed past us, looking scared. One of them said, "There's someone in the woods." We stopped and turned. Behind our school, there's a small cluster of trees, not a forest, just enough to separate the school from the back road. And sure enough, partially hidden behind the trees was that same clown again, same tattered clothes, same painted face. He was just standing there at the edge, barely in sight, slowly waving. And it wasn't a random wave. He was clearly waving at the girls who had run by, almost like he was trying to get their attention. Chris and I didn't speak a word. We just bolted. I told my parents everything as soon as I got home. They called the school, and later I heard another kid say the police had been contacted again and came to check the area, but they didn't find anyone. No one ever figured out who that clown was. To this day, I don't know if he was just pulling a sick prank or if he had something more dangerous in mind. But what still haunts me is the fact that he came back after the lockdown and hid, watching kids leave school. This took place fairly recently. I live just outside of Philadelphia with my son and my stepdaughter. I call her my stepdaughter because I officially became her guardian after my best friend's daughter came to live with us. Back in 2016, my closest friend Joanne was murdered by her husband. His case made national headlines. He was later found guilty of 5 additional homicides. He's now serving 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Currently, I teach at the same middle school my son attends. He's in the grade below mine, while my stepdaughter is 1 grade ahead. Their classrooms are both located near mine. This particular event happened on March 30th, 2020, just as the pandemic lockdowns were starting to happen. Our school was rather isolated. The next nearest school was around 10 miles away, a gas station about 2 miles, and a small park about 600 meters from us. Because of our remote location, we were among the last schools to go into lockdown. It was a typical warm Monday, and I was teaching math to my 6th graders when I received a phone alert. Someone had come to pick up my stepdaughter. The school's system notifies guardians when someone arrives for a student, but my stepdaughter was 3 classrooms away from mine, and she didn't have any scheduled appointments or nearby family. I replied that I was at the school and no authorized person should be there to pick her up. That immediately set off alarm bells. They said it was her biological father. However, that detail isn't even listed in school records. A few minutes of tense silence followed. Then the woman on the phone said she would contact the principal to determine the next steps. I had a bad feeling in my gut. I called her classroom and asked for her to come to mine. Right after I hung up and resumed class, she arrived. Not even 10 minutes later, the school lockdown alarm started blaring. I quickly had the students block the door with desks and cover the windows, and we all took shelter in the corner of the classroom. I had a strong suspicion about who this lockdown might involve. After nearly 46 minutes in lockdown, I was taken out of the building by police. They questioned me about my connection to this man, referencing CPS documentation. I explained how I took in my friend's daughter after the tragedy. The police then shared how he had escaped. A prison transport bus was attacked when a car rammed into it. 10 inmates died 2 guards were knocked out and 20 prisoners escaped. Authorities had already stationed officers at our house, expecting him to show up. But he never came. When the school went into lockdown, they realized one of the escapees was nearby. If they hadn't reacted in time, I don't even want to think about what might have happened. This next part occurred when I was in 9th grade. I'm 21 now, but the memory still lingers. I attended a regular public high school in a typical suburban town. We practiced lockdown drills once every couple of months, so when the alarm sounded, I assumed it was just another drill. It was a Wednesday, 4th period, Earth Science. We'd just finished a pop quiz. As I packed my things, the PA system crackled to life. "This is a lockdown. Lock all doors, turn off lights, remain silent." No one panicked at first. Our teacher, Mrs. Chen, sighed, got up, locked the door, turned off the lights, and directed us to the corner. People were giggling and whispering like it was routine. Then came a second announcement. Same voice, but this time hurried and serious. "This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." Silence fell instantly. Mrs. Chen signaled for quiet. She looked visibly concerned and checked her phone repeatedly. We heard faint sirens in the distance, then footsteps, slow, deliberate ones in the hallway. They stopped right outside our classroom door. We all stared. No one moved. Then 3 soft knocks, not forceful, just slow and steady. A moment later, the doorknob began to turn, locked, of course, but the person kept twisting it gently back and forth. Then a male voice. "It's just a drill, you can open the door." Everyone turned to look at Mrs. Chen. She simply placed her finger over her lips and shook her head firmly. The knocking continued, more insistent now, as the voice kept calling out. Our room was on the first floor in the science wing. I was frozen in fear. I'm sure the others were too. Eventually, the sound stopped. 5 long minutes passed in dead silence. Then a scream, a girl's voice from somewhere down the hall, one single scream and then nothing. A few students started quietly crying. Some whispered that they saw shadows passing by the window on the door. Every time someone tried to speak, even in a whisper, Mrs. Chen hushed them. After what felt like an eternity, we finally heard police officers shouting instructions down the hall, telling us to stay in place. They moved room to room. When they reached ours, they used a key to unlock the door. Mrs. Chen only opened it after verifying their badges. We were led out in a line past other classes. Police cars surrounded the campus. A SWAT van stood nearby. I didn't see much, but I did notice one officer leading a man in handcuffs, not a student, older, pale, with long dark hair and wearing all black. Later, we learned that a mentally unstable man had slipped into the school through a side door during a delivery. That entrance was right at the end of the science wing. They didn't reveal much, just that no one was hurt and the situation was under control. But I still remember the way he turned the handle, the scream in the hallway, and how nothing about that day felt under control.